Hey there, this is Jexy with the Systems Alliance, and in this video I want to go over BioWare's developer Mark Darrah and his comments that Zelda is the reason why Mass Effect Andromeda didn't sell well. So as many of you know, Mass Effect Andromeda was a highly anticipated sequel to the original Mass Effect trilogy. It was supposed to be an amazing new game. If you watched the original cinematic trailer, there were so many things you were going to be able to do that would enhance the gameplay of the original Mass Effect trilogy, but still keep the same aspects of it. If you saw it in its alpha stages, it looked amazing graphically. So obviously it was going to look even better once the game came out. I mean, that's just the alpha stage, never mind the beta and the actual release of the game. Of course, as everyone knows, it had an extremely troubled development history. They had 5 years to develop it, but 3.5 of those years basically had to be scrapped. There was internal politics that were going on that was a mess. They basically said that by the end, they weren't even polishing up the game as they normally would be in that stage. They were just trying to fix all the problems as they hit, try and keep up with all of the issues because the game was breaking down faster than they could fix it. Never mind polish it or anything like that. That, of course, didn't give the writers enough time to do their thing. No one had enough time. The Frostbite engine that they were using, which I know a lot gets put on the Frostbite engine is in terms of it doesn't work well because it's a first-person shooter type engine, so it doesn't work with a third-person role-playing adventure game. But Dragon Age Inquisition had to use the same engine, and they nailed the facial animation, so I'm not really sure why the Andromeda team was unable to get the same thing out of it. You would think they're all BioWare, even though it's a different city and studio, it's still overall the same studio of BioWare. They'd communicate, hey, here's what I did to get the facial animations to work, but they didn't do any of that. The "my face is tired" meme is classic and sad. So despite everything going wrong, apparently it still made money for BioWare and EA. Obviously probably a quarter of what they were hoping. And part of that is because once the game came out, the initial reviews were pretty terrible. Not only from fans, but from publications alike. And it's really hard to not get an 8 or a 9 or even higher from a publication, but they were giving it pretty low scores, and for good reason. On release, the game was pretty garbage in comparison to what fans were expecting from BioWare in terms of a Mass Effect sequel, and just in general from BioWare because they put out quality products. The only one product that they really failed to put out that dropped the ball in terms of quality anytime recently was Dragon Age 2, which only had a 2-year development cycle compared to Dragon Age Origins' 7-year development cycle, and EA had purchased BioWare by then and had them force it out the door. So there was really nothing that BioWare could do about that, whereas Andromeda had 5 years and they just couldn't get it right. So obviously as Anthem, BioWare's new game and maybe one of the biggest games in 2019 when it releases, that's coming up and everyone's really hoping they get it right. EA obviously is hoping it's financially successful. BioWare needs it to be successful to possibly help them save their studio and help them continue Mass Effect games, Dragon Age games, and Anthem as well. Fans are desperately hoping it's good and not another Destiny type game, which absolutely bombed with fans and critics, and their player base is pretty much dead at this point. And every time they try and revive it, they make things worse with the type of loot boxes they put in and more predatory practices. So Bungie just can't get it right. They keep on lying straight to their fans' face, end up getting called out on it, say that they have a fix, and then it ends up being another lie. So people are hoping it's not that. Casey Hudson in his interview said that it's going to be like something we've never seen before. It's not going to be like a live service game like we think it is. It's going to be very single player focused in terms of what you get out of it, and yet at the same time still be wide open game with multiplayer. So still not sure how that's going to work, but Casey Hudson is generally someone who you can count on, and he hasn't really gone wrong yet with fans since he was not involved in Andromeda and the like. However, it does worry me that one of the developers on Anthem, who was also a developer on Andromeda, Mark Darrah, in an interview said these things. Now, the whole interview is actually great. It's a long interview with Game Informer, really informative, tons of questions, tons of answers. You'll really learn a lot. However, one of the questions was, did Andromeda get a fair shake? And Mark Darrah's response was no.
You think Mass Effect Andromeda got a fair shake?
No.
Why not?
I think it came out in a really, really busy window of RPGs, perhaps the busiest window in the in the history of the games industry where 5 RPGs launched in the same month.
Can you shorten that up at all?
How about it came out the same month as Zelda?
And he's even clarified it since by admitting that Andromeda was a flawed game, but at the same time the reviews were harsh. And I'm sorry, I'm just not seeing the connection. But he originally said, and still basically stands by it, that Zelda was the main reason that this game didn't sell well because it came out during the same month. He said it came out possibly during the busiest window of the gaming industry with 5 RPGs coming out at the same time, but literally none of them have the same audience. So you can't even go there. But let's just dissect that a little bit as it is. So the other games, some of them were smaller indie type games, so those are not going to make a big impact anyway. The other games he was talking about, like let's just say Zelda is really the only other AAA title that was expected to sell millions like Andromeda was, and did, just not nearly as many millions as it was supposed to. Zelda is only available on Nintendo. You can't get it on your Xbox. You can't get it on your PC. You can't get it on your PlayStation. Mass Effect Andromeda is available on the Xbox, on the PlayStation, on the PC, and you can't play it on Nintendo. So what is he talking about? That doesn't make any sense. The audiences are completely different. Even if you own both systems, if you can afford to own both systems, then you can also afford to own games for both of those systems. So you would just buy Andromeda and also Zelda. And if you can't afford both systems, then you're not playing both games anyway. What worries me about this is that he's working on Anthem now. So what are his excuses going to be when he screws up Anthem? And I'm not saying he in particular screwed up Andromeda or he in particular will screw up Anthem, but he's certainly making excuses already, I feel like, for Anthem, because he's making these excuses for Andromeda which hold no weight at all. Another thing, the current release date for Andromeda, you want to talk about packed dates with actual competitors? Look at this right now. Look at what's coming out when Andromeda is coming out. Tell me that doesn't make any sense compared to his old argument when it was really just Zelda, which is on a different platform. So it really had no competition, I would argue, as far as real competition to a game like Andromeda goes, compared to the actual competition they're going to have when they launch Anthem. So to me, that's why I'm so worried about someone like this working on a project like Anthem, which has to succeed, which we all want to be great, but are all worried about that it won't be, because he's not taking responsibility. The responsibility is that the game at launch, and still to this day, even with all the patches, was one of the worst launches of any AAA title that you could have. Sure, it's not as bad as Battlefront 2 with the fiasco there. You know, it's not as bad as some of the Sims games that EA has had, or it's not as bad as Destiny 2, which is just terrible. It's maybe not even as bad as the first Destiny, which had to be completely revamped and the whole voiceover actors taken out, a new one put in. I mean, we're talking about a lot of changes going on here. But maybe after those, maybe it was right there. It was pretty bad. The graphics were just not finished. As you can see here, it looks like worse graphics in Andromeda a decade after the original graphics in the first Mass Effect. Now, I can play the first Mass Effect right now, and the graphics are great, but they're also a lot better in Mass Effect 2, and you could argue even better in Mass Effect 3, as you would expect, not to mention that Dragon Age Inquisition released after Mass Effect 3, and that was the first one from BioWare that was on the new systems, the Xbox One and the PS4, and that game looks amazing. It's a whole new level of graphics from BioWare. And then it just took not one step back, not two, not three, and maybe not even four, maybe 5 steps back graphically for BioWare. And to me, that's pretty pathetic. To everyone, it was pretty pathetic. And that's just graphics. But as I said, the entire production history of Mass Effect Andromeda was just a complete mess. No one was getting their stuff done on time. The ideas weren't flowing down right. There was no leadership. Casey Hudson had left by this point because of the internal politics, which were just terrible. Going off of the investigative report that was done, there was so much internal fighting. People thought everyone else was going to backstab them. It was just a mess. It wasn't a cohesive unit like they normally have, who all love each other and love making a great game. This was just a mess. And what came out, first of all, I'm almost surprised that the game came out at all after reading the article, because it didn't seem like it was going to. Then on top of that, it wasn't even finished. The writing wasn't done, and they never really even finished the game. And let's say the writing was bad to begin with, and it wasn't going to be fixed, even though we know it's not true. They didn't have enough time. But let's say it was. If you play the game right now, after all the patches that have fixed all the facial animations and everything like that, It hasn't made the graphics amazing, it's just fixed the really poor animations. I want to be clear with that. The game doesn't look great graphically right now. It looks somewhere between Mass Effect 1 and 2. It's just that the facial animations are now up to par with how they should be. But overall, it's not a bad game. It's a decent game. I won't even say okay. It's a little bit better than okay. I mean, you pick it up, it's a pretty fun game. There's lots of cool stuff to explore. The storyline is very intriguing, but my personal problem with the storyline is that there's way too many open ends. And I know they were planning on having probably a whole trilogy of Mass Effect Andromeda games, but there's so many questions that aren't answered in the game. But the main one to everyone, which was supposed to be DLC at least, whether or not it should have been in the game originally, whatever, was what happened to the Quarian arc. And now apparently, they're finishing it up with a book. But that's like finishing up a movie with a book. You're not reaching the same people. It's not the same medium. You need to have it in the movie or in the sequel or, in case of games, as DLC. This is what you need to do in order to have a good game, and they simply dropped the ball. So literally the game ends with a cliffhanger after, win or whatever. Oh my god, now you're finally getting news on the Quarian arc, which has all the other aliens that you missed from the original trilogy in this Quarian arc. And yet we never find out, we never get to play it, we never get to rescue it, so totally dropping the ball there. And they had an opportunity. EA, BioWare, they had an opportunity to patch the game up so it was at least respectable. And they got it up animation-wise to a respectable level, but that's it. They never finished it. It's an incomplete game. And there were some things I actually liked about Andromeda. They're talking about dark energy. You see all this dark matter, dark energy, all this stuff going around, all these great mysteries that we could have unlocked, and yet we didn't get any of it. I thought it might maybe patch up even the parts of Mass Effect 3 where, because they got a new writer, they were unable to go into the whole dark energy plot with that. They ended up kind of making a little bit more generic of an ending. Forget the choice ending, which a lot of people didn't like in Mass Effect 3, but just the actual idea behind everything. If you remember in Mass Effect 2, when you're going to rescue Tali and get her for your crew, you're on the planet, something's going on with the sun, something to do with dark energy, something to do with maybe the Reapers. I mean, this was getting really big, like really over your head type big, and you really wanted to explore that. And then they kind of dumbed it down for Mass Effect 3. Still an amazing game, love playing it, tons of fun. But that part of the story, the main storyline, I think could have been better had they had the original writer for the first two and for the books in there for Mass Effect 3. And it seemed like they might patch that up with Andromeda, but then of course they didn't. And we got what we got. So with this particular developer saying that it was The Legend of Zelda's fault because that was such a good game, or that if it didn't come out, maybe Mass Effect Andromeda would have had a little bit of higher ratings? No, that has nothing to do with it. If you're in the 70s, low 70s or high 70s, it doesn't matter. You're in the 70s, you're a video game, and you're Mass Effect. All the other Mass Effect games are in the 90s. Mass Effect 2 is considered the best game of all time. Mass Effect 1 was on many lists as number 1 as the best game of all time until Mass Effect 2. And Mass Effect 3 is still in the 90s and still a ton of fun to play compared to pretty much every other game you could possibly pick up. So expectations were sky high, and rightfully so, for Andromeda, and they're the ones who failed to meet them. This developer was part of the team that failed to meet them, and everyone knows why. There's a million reasons to point to, and all has to do with a troubled development history. But to blame that on other games, to me, that's pretty bush league. So let me know what your thoughts are on this. Do you think that we should be worried about Anthem because people like this, who are making excuses for poor work, are now making the next new game that's supposed to save BioWare? Do you think Anthem's going to be great regardless of the excuses that they're trying to make? Or do you think it's going to actually not turn out so well because of this? Or do you think that we're going to hear this again? Oh, Anthem was released during a busy time. That's why it didn't sell well. Let me know your thoughts, but me personally, if you make a good game, people will buy it. And if you're a big studio like BioWare with the financial backing of EA and you make a great game, people will buy it. It'll be all over the place, advertised everywhere. People will buy it. But the real question is, will it be good? Will it be worth buying? because I can already tell you from talking to fans of BioWare, Mass Effect, and Dragon Age and everything that they've done, there are a lot of people who will not be buying Anthem right away because they've been burned too many times. Specifically, burned so bad with Andromeda that they're worried about buying Anthem. So the only thing that's going to make him buy Anthem is by good word of mouth. And that's one thing that Andromeda probably had the worst word of mouth out of any video game other than the ones I mentioned before, Battlefront 2, Destiny, all those ones that started huge controversies. Other than that, though, Anthem better have a really good word of mouth in order for it to sell the kind of numbers that they want and need it to. So let me know your thoughts on that in the comment section below, and we'll catch you later.